You are listening to the Firecracker Podcast with Tony Rico.
And we are back in the studio with our most experienced soldiers, officers. I don't know. You got to get you guys in the room. That's a lot. This is a lot of years of experience between you two. We've got, I would say, Vice President Sean Brashear and no title Donnie Hagberg. Hardly fair. We got to create something. Shit, man.
He's lucky.
God dang it. But, I always appreciate you guys coming in, and let's get into now the guidelines. So now what do we want to do? So the story is the story. We want to lay this in front of our coaches because what are our expectations going in? And Bill Hicks sent me an email, and it was a good opportunity to be able to apply something that we need to talk about. So expectations for coaches going into the summer. The very first thing that I have on my list is all experience is good. So just know right away, no matter what you go through in your summer, as bad as it's going to be in the moment, it's all good experience. Now, if it's an experience that you've repeated 5 and 10 times and it's not a good one, let's plug in for some help. Let's try to change the experience, but all experience is good. First one I put down is be certain of your direction. So for coaches, know where you're going this summer. Know it is, captain of your own ship, know where the ship is going, have a clear course, know what happens. Sometimes it's qualifiers, right? So if we don't qualify here, what are we going to do over here? If we qualify over here, what are we going to do over here? Don't be wishy-washy. Do not try to piece it together, week by week. And so a classic example is you're out of a qualifier, and then afterwards you're deciding right there that you're going to go to another qualifier, and then you try to talk to your parents about going to New Mexico. So what would you say about clear your direction, be clear in your direction?
Well, I think Donnie spoke about it when we were talking a little bit before we came on air, is, having a calendar, having a schedule, and getting that out to your family so they have an understanding of the plan and even the backup plans, right? Just like that cruise ship you're talking about or that boat. It's like if a hurricane hits, they already know their alternative routes in regards to where they're going to be heading. And so that's the thing. It's like, all right, well, if somehow, some way this doesn't happen here, our plan is to go here. Right. And then so on and so forth. So again, communication, being open, transparency, making sure that you're aware of your team's abilities to being realistic to your team's expectations. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we all have high goals and we want to be successful.
And nothing wrong with that. And experience is going to, whether it's more distorted or less distorted, but that's okay. You want to be ambitious. We want people to be.
So I think, again, that's the biggest thing is making sure that everybody has their information. And I know it's tough sometimes, even for us. I'm on the phone with Roman a lot, and we're trying to communicate everything we can to people, so they know the plans. And even now, making sure they're registered with PGF or getting all their background, coaches' background checks. Right. There's so much little stuff that goes into getting to where you want to go. But having the plan in place and making sure it's communicated, so whether it's through your emails, whether it's through your, a calendar page, a team page. I'm not very good with technology, but what I do is every single week I send like a team email. So every week they get an email from me that's kind of an update. Sometimes they're a little more thorough than others, depending upon what I think the nature of it needs to communicate. But I would say I'm always making sure each and every week that there's a level of communication so they have an understanding of what we're doing this weekend and what we may be doing 2 weekends from now and so on and so forth. So,
and how that benefits the coach is that there'll be less questioning.
Correct.
From the people
I don't need that.
In your operation. Right. And when you're uncertain, there's more questioning. And there's definitely resistance. So when you're uncertain and you're asking or you're presenting, now I don't mean having a conversation and getting some feedback. There's good ways to do that. But if you're uncertain, you're going to get resistance, and now you're going to become victimized by how people feel. Now, does that pitcher not getting many innings in the qualifier? Does that family really want to go? And
you can't get caught up in trying to please everyone, because at the end of the day, you're not going to make everyone happy. And as I tell our families, look, I'm not always happy with the things that we have to do. Right? So if I'm going to Hemet, I don't want to go to Hemet. Right? But these are not decisions that are made for the best interest of me individually or any individual on the team. They're made for the best interest of our collective entity.
Right.
So our collective entity needs to do this. And sometimes that may mean we're going to Hemet.
Right. Not because it's not a nice town.
No,
it's a great town. We love the miners. We love the people out. It's the drive to Hemet. It's often the commute, and it's those things. But it's also that price, because there was a time when we weren't driving to Hemet. We were driving to Vegas. Not as often, but I mean, there is that sacrifice that is just part of what we do. Hopefully in the big picture of things, it's not for 15, 20 years of putting it, that as you become a more experienced coach, you start to tailor things and things like that.
It's gotten better. We don't have to drive out to him at
Not
3
as
out of
much.
4 weeks
Correct.
anymore. So
Or to make that type of drive.
Diamond
But
Valley.
but on the other side of that, look at what NorCal does and look what Central Cal
sure.
does.
We're lucky.
And how and so when you kind of put it on the scale there and you think, what we need to do is drive that distance back up towards their direction now and bring them meet them. So there's always going to be something because this is a widespread sport that we are. So the whole idea there, though, is to create balance to how much you're traveling, when do you travel, and you're not just keeping up with the softball Joneses, going wherever you need to go. Going wherever you're going because other people are doing it. I think that's important, too. So, Donnie, what would you say as far as like being clear in your direction and knowing?
Well, kind of what Sean was saying, as far as getting an email out to your families on a weekly basis, being proactive with that will kind of make things easy. Even if you go into detail on those emails, it saves you from getting 20 emails back. By sending out that one long email, you answer questions of maybe 5 or 6 different families at once, as opposed to getting those 5 or 6 emails. Now you got to reply back to individually.
Kind of staying ahead of the game.
Staying ahead of the game.
Right.
And I try to do that as much as possible. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm sending too much stuff, but at the same time, it's really cut down on the questions that I'm having to answer on a weekly basis. I know this time of the year is where the emails start to ramp up, getting the stuff out there for the hotels and kind of getting back on people about, hey, the dues are due now on the 1st, not the 15th, because now it's not high school season anymore. Right. We need this money now.
Right.
And
that's another point that I had made a note of, too, is that you're preparing for the end of the year. All right, we're getting into crunch time, summertime, and everything's going to be going really, really fast. But you're also preparing for the end of the year, all your responsibilities, your uniforms for pickup players, communication, what ifs, different things like that, and then you're preparing for the beginning of next year, and that starts here in the next month or so, right? Financially and schedule wise, and different things like that, right?
I'm 2 weeks away from my first qualifier, so I mean, our practices have really ramped up here in the last couple weeks. We're too deep at every position, and I get out there and it's compete.
Yeah.
Compete. I got to fill out a lineup in 2 weeks. Who wants to be in it?
Yeah, and then a lot of that consumes our minds. So if you look at the 50-plus years that all of us have experience-wise, but let's go back to in our first 3 or 4 years. What did we not know back then? I'll be honest with you, my first 5 years, I couldn't have done what you guys do. I mean, it's think of the learning curve of what you know now and how easy it is to say that now. And I got to give you credit. I mean, you've always been relatively organized. But I guess I'm thinking about you, Donnie. But just think of how much you've grown and how much I've grown and how a lot of coaches have grown over time, that this is all a collection of experience, because it sounds so good now. But I can remember it wasn't that obvious. It just wasn't that obvious.
Well, the other thing for a coach is making sure you have a good administrator, right? So it makes you look better. Melinda makes you look better. Roman makes me look better. And
your staff.
So you being able to even today as I'm coming in here, I'm shooting texts back and forth with Roman, and he's helping within, making sure the girls that don't have photos up, because some will link their PGF information, but they don't get a photo in, and there's all that stuff. Roman's handling a lot of that while I'm sitting here, doing this.
So if you haven't created a staff, if you haven't developed relationships to rely on people, and you are that coach doing everything by yourself, what do you guys have to say to that coach?
You're nuts.
It's a little crazy, but if you have the time, I mean, for me, I do a lot of the administrative stuff, but I set apart, 3 hours in the daytime when I get up to have my coffee. I go out on the front porch and under the patio area, and that's where I make my phone calls to colleges. I handle all the administrative stuff on our team, and just kind of gotten used to doing it.
It's a great takeaway. So set aside that time. Now I ask you this: for every 10 coaches doing everything by themselves, how many of them are doing it successfully? How many of them are not questioned by their parents? How many of them are handling
maybe 1 out of 10?
Yeah. So our advice, until you get to that point where you figure things out, I'm going to go with you're a fool or you're really inexperienced to try to do things by yourself. Yeah. If you're collecting money and nobody else has an idea what's happening to that money. It doesn't mean you're automatically a crook, but you will get questioned, especially if you don't have an administrative type mind. So the importance of a staff, the importance of people, the importance of transparency, just being not transparency doesn't mean every time there's a question you have to open up the register and show everyone what's going on. That's not it, but you have to be transparent. But create a staff that your people around you are what make your operation. You might be the top of it or the center of it, but we're only as good as the people around us.
Something you have said to me has stuck over the course of the last couple of years is just surround yourself with good people. And that's what I've really, really tried to do is get good people around me. And I've seen the success from doing that.
Yeah, it shows, and it shows in your operation. Again, that's the great story of where you're at now. And then we like to go back to man, I remember we were all just a mess. We're all learning it the hard way. Sean, you were talking a little bit about, when we're talking about knowing your direction, you're talking about types of competition.
Yep.
So that you will say to your coaches what?
I'll get asked that question by coaches, what should they be looking for in events? And, I try to tell them that there's three, in my mind, I've kind of narrowed it down to three ways of what you want for your team. And sometimes they'll all apply. Some teams are looking for, excuse me, for all of that, and some teams are on different levels. So, there's competition is number one. So, knowing where your team sits. Is this a PGF team? Are we a Triple Crown national team? Are we an AFA team, right? So at some point, people like to put themselves in, parents, families, players want to be in a position where they're going to compete to win. They're going after that prize. You may have to narrow down your rotations because it's a competitive nature.
What happens when you have a team that isn't maybe quite top class level, but they believe they are? Do you let things play out and teach them afterwards? Do you create communication and say, hey, I understand
I try
you
to
feel
be
that,
very open with them. You know what I mean? I'm never going to, I've never tried to be the guy that says this is what you have to do.
Right.
I just try to advise them as to what I see, right?
And so not, well, this is what you have to do, and not this is how good you are and how good you're not. You don't talk like that, right?
And honestly, there's times where, I'm not 100% right. So there's teams that play beyond what I maybe thought they would, right? And there's teams that have played less than what I thought they would, including teams of my own. But I would say I try to be very open and transparent in conversations because what I would want to be able to do is at the end of it, I don't want them to look back at me and say, hey, bro, I really didn't understand what you meant. So I try to be as communicative as I can, as like, okay, be ready for that bumpy ride. Are you prepared for an 0-2? Are you prepared to go all the way to New Mexico, spend all the money of your families to get beat 10-zip, and then get back on that van with 15 kids and so on and so forth? And if you can handle it and you can survive it, then by all means, the experience might, and still you can get something from it.
Make the experience something you learn from. But if it's only competitive, only we went there to qualify and we didn't, and now we failed, it's a disappointment.
Now
every dollar feels like $100.
Exactly.
Right?
So I try to, again, have that. And I think for the most part, our group has been pretty good. I've been lucky to have a lot of good guys that are in it for the right reasons and are really, participating with the idea of learning. And I think that's something that I've been lucky with the guys that have been in the program with us, is like they ask these questions. Hicks is a guy.
And that network of guys, which is growing now over the years that you've done this, is, I'm going to say, 10 to 20 deep now? I mean, it's a pretty big network.
Yeah, I'd say at least, there's 10 for sure important, and then 10 in training, so to speak. You know what I mean? That are still kind of
But that's the integration. It's like, I would say 1,800 teams when you have sophomore or junior, there's integrations, the experience, kind of here's how it goes, coming in, learning the ropes and stuff like that. But I think that's huge. And that's powerful because you're empowering those guys in the network.
Right.
And
I don't want to be their ultimate decision maker. I just want to be a person that they can lean on and give them some guidance with the experience that we've gone through. Right.
And even in your position of leadership, as a great approach rather than dictate.
Right.
Right.
100%.
So it's really how you communicate. Know the types of competition out there. I think that is important, and try your best. And don't be afraid to reach out. If you're not sure, send me an email. What do you think about this? In the end, we need to develop our players. And in the end, they need playing experience. In the end, is it 3 out of 5 games every weekend for 40-something weekends? What is the minimum amount of at-bats over a year that a player needs to develop? What's the minimum amount of games that players need to develop? There's no real template, and so everyone goes week to week. Shoot, I've said this a million times, 16 Little League games, that's all we had. So times that times 3 at-bats a game. That's how many at-bats we had in the whole year. So if your daughter's getting 100, 150 at bats, maybe not all at the time you want, but our job is to develop, and I think that's really important. So sometimes you get exposed with competition. You're still getting experience. It's a good thing. So Mel brought up a good one. I asked her this question, and she said, don't avoid the issues. So when there's something going on, address it, right? What do you guys think about that?
I always address things, or I don't like to have. I want to know that when we're playing games, that what's going on in the stands with my parents is all positive. If I've got one dad coach on our team, and he's more of of kind of just my eyes and ears with all the families and whatnot, and we try to squash anything immediately, because if you let that fester, it's just going to turn things all bad.
So here's an example. You've already made the mistake of saying you've got a number one pitcher. So now but you've got two pitchers that are pitching equally, and they both expect to pitch this game. So now you have to make a decision. So the coach that starts one player and waits to see how the other player feels after the game is behind the eight ball. The coach that pulls the other pitcher aside before and says, look, here's what I'm thinking. Okay, I'm just letting you know this is what I'm thinking for these reasons. Boom, and you run it. And you give them some type of say in the conversation. You stayed on the front end. You can really take that into a lot of different areas. Hey, parents, sit down. Here's what I'm thinking. We could do this. If this doesn't work out, I know this might be a last-minute adjustment. I'm learning to get this schedule right, but I don't want to impose on you any financial distress, anything like that. Here's what I'm thinking. If this happens, we can do this or we can do that. Let me run that by you. Now, again, it's not that you're at their beck and call all the time, but you're given some ownership. You got a little wiggle room with something like that. Stay on the front end of things. Because I think you're much likely to get that type of support when you stay on the front end of things. So issues, it could be parents, other coaches, players, but stay on the front end of that with that stuff, right? I think that's really important. And then what about extra uniforms? How do you guys prepare for like pickup players and things like that?
Me personally, I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty much wearing all dry fits. So every time we place an order for uniforms, I'll order an extra pair of pants, an extra jersey, an extra pair of pants, an extra jersey. Over the course of a couple years, when a parent comes on, maybe that at the very end of the year, I don't want to have them go out and spend $200 to playing PGF with us on 4 jerseys. Hey, if you don't mind being number 65 this week, here you go.
Sure.
And if it's maybe a little bit big on her.
Hey, if it's cost effective, right? Right. And Sean, you're pretty prepared always for
same. Yeah, we keep typically one in every size. Pants I probably have more pants in my garage than Glove has in their warehouse. Yeah. I'm that moron that has a. So
do you collect everything at the end of the year?
No. Buy and keep. I don't deal with the BS of you know what I mean. There's too much hassle. Yeah, it's not worth the headache.
So you're collecting by just buying a couple extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you said, if we pick up a kid, if someone came, and played with us just for that week, then that might be a loaner case on that situation. But everybody else's, that's their stuff.
Right. So once they pay for it,
it's theirs.
Yep. And that's the best way to do it, right? I've got now generally, so you start to enter the game time, bracket time, championship time. Coaches, you're all going to nod. We all nod our heads. It's tough when we get competitive. Just be respectful. Be respectful to umpires. Be respectful to other coaches. Be respectful to your parents during competition. Everything you do with behavior, it's the first impression that your team makes. So we all say it, but then we all know what it's like to just get heated or whatever happened to that first little thing that sets off, or just not right, or the game goes a certain direction. But don't lose your stuff, man. Just keep it there, because in the end, how you are under duress is going to make a statement. And whether people will ever say it to you or not, we all want to be in the hands of someone that's secure under stress. So that's the last point that I have on here, is that, be calm when the shit hits the fan. Right. We know stuff is going to happen. So are you entering the summer thinking that nothing's going to happen? We know it's designed there. So how are you going to handle it? Every little thing that you do, have you thought about your behavior? Go back, and there's little videos here and there, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and all I'm doing is laying down a template for you to copy. My professional behavior is not natural. My God, no, it was all learned. I never saw a professional ball player in person until I was 18 years old. So tying the shoes, the way they walked on the field, the way they acted in between repetitions of ground balls, I'd never seen anything like that. I was always spastic, going 100 miles an hour, and just all of a sudden there's a calmness. So this type of professionalism, this type of behavior, in the end, I've finished a lot of videos like this. We're always being evaluated. And when somebody on the other side of the field sees you doing something that's respectful, dignified, there are the kind of families and players that you want to play for you, they're noticing that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then how many times have you got that email, Sean, from someone that says, hey, we want to be under that type of guidance, right?
Yes. No, I try to make a point, to a player who stands out, and whether it's through effort, performance, attitude, that when we go through that line, that I'll make sure that I identify to that player and just to let her know that I appreciated the competitiveness or the competition of that day. Yeah. Because I feel like it's important to make sure that, we're rewarding players that are doing things, again, and it could be just effort, a kid who's leaving her feet on a foul line, on two fly balls, whatever it may be. It could be the pitcher that was, handled herself under duress, whatever that is. And so I make sure to try to do that.
We can learn from every game.
And it's meaningful today. I mean, this past weekend, I went back to Huntington and worked with Martinez and Mel's and that. And I actually got an email. One of the little girls, I was working with them on just getting better leads and different things, and then talking to her. And then I gave her a high five. Her mom sent me an email on Monday morning and said that, she asked her daughter afterwards what she thought of the day, and she said, I liked the guy that gave me the high five and everything else. And so it was pretty cool.
Look at that takeaway, right?
And
does she even need to know who you are and what you've done? Who cares?
She said, I don't know you, and you don't know me.
But isn't that great for us? Yeah. Isn't that great when you go back to like where it all started? Like that's where you started to earn your reputation, right there. Right. That's how you earned your reputation. So it's kind of the beauty of that, And in the end, does every kid need to be a superstar to make us happy, or does every game need to be a win? I remember George Araujo saying it to the team. What'd you guys learn? First thing he opens up after the game, and 5 girls. And I was like, okay, I'm stealing that. And there's always a takeaway, even when it's really, really tough. So real quick, just to kind of go through things, coaches, definitely know the direction of your team, know the direction of your summer, know where you're going. That's really, really important. One thing I missed on real quick, when your team is in public, be responsible for their behavior. So when your team's in a restaurant, this is going to be important when we talk about players here in a minute, but when your team's in a restaurant, you're walking into a hotel, anytime you are in public areas, be aware of how your kids are being in public. My dad taught me a rule kind of growing up. He was a veteran, and it's like, look, if I fought for this country and I gave you this freedom, I should be able to eat my meal without having to turn my head every 3 seconds for your freedom to be allowed. And so just create a balance in that. And so just monitor your team. You going to say something on that? Or?
No, yeah, I tend to talk to our team about that a lot, and it's more so because I let them know, whether you're on the airplane on the way to Colorado, how many college coaches on their way to Colorado? Just because she's not wearing all of her gear, that might be the school of your dreams sitting right behind you in plain clothes, and it's an assistant coach, and you don't know who she is, and you're acting like a moron. Yeah.
And that really happens in the parking lot, too. Getting out of the car, walking to the car after games.
Talking to your mom, standing by the snack bar. Yeah. I'm huge on that.
And I think most importantly, it's manners.
Just be a good person. That's what it boils down to. Just be good people.
Where would we'll just say our softball world be if we applied the golden rule, treat people like you want to be treated? And then I would say, where would our internet culture be if there was an internet law that said you could say whatever you want to say, but if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. It'd be pretty quiet. It'd be like this. Nice job. Every now and then. All right, guys, that's it. Coach's guidelines. Just think about some things. Be clear yourself. Own your situations. Everyone's going to feel it. You're going to be glad in the end. And then 2 weeks after the end of the year, you get to start over, and we get to try it again. Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate your time, and we're going to wrap it up. Appreciate everyone for listening.